Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our monthly WatchGuard webinar for July 2021. This is Madison Slater, your tour guide for the month of July for our WatchGuard product updates. So let's go ahead and jump in. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. All of our lines will be on mute automatically. This webinar is being recorded, so you can play that back on our website later if you need to. There is a chat window located on the right side of your screen, so feel free to send over any questions that you might have, and we will be happy to answer those at the end of our webinar. All right, so this month's topics, we've got some new WatchGuard hardware updates for you guys. It's been a little bit since we've been able to talk about new hardware, so some exciting stuff coming there. We're going to talk about some new stuff with AuthPoint, their geofencing policies, as well as looking at some of the new integrations that are open. And then we will be doing a demo on how to limit VPN access with TDR. And as always, we'll provide you our upcoming training schedule at the end. That way, if you are looking at trying to get some more official training here on our WatchGuard products, we'll be happy to let you know what we've got coming up for you guys. Before we get into our actual topics, just an update on firmware updates. So again, WatchGuard has been updating or breaking their firmware updates out into different hardware versions. A lot of this is based on the chipset, based on the functionality of the device. Nothing new as of yet. These are still what we talked about during our June webinar. So for our XTM devices, our older appliances, we're still sitting at 12.1.3 update 5. For some of our smaller tabletop devices, our smaller T-Series devices, and some of our older M-Series, like the M200 and 300, we are at 12.5.7 update 3. And then for a lot of our newer models and our bigger M-Series devices, we are at 12.7 update 1. All of this was released back in May, so they've been out for a few months at this point. We are recommending these versions. We've been running them here. We've been running these for our managed clients. Have not run into any issues, so please make sure if you have not upgraded your firmware recently that you are getting those up to date. Just in general, our philosophy is to wait on the update 1 at the very least for any new firmware. So we feel confident in telling you guys that you can update to these versions. As always, though, we do as much testing here as we can. We try to get as much insight into these firmware versions as we possibly can. If at any point you have upgraded to a firmware version that we are recommending here during our webinar and you run into any issues, obviously you are probably opening a case with WatchGuard, but please also let us know. We rely on feedback from our clients and feedback from other people in the WatchGuard community as far as how our recommendations work. So I always like to hear of, well, I don't like to hear of those issues, but I like when those issues are shared with me. So if you ever run into any problems with anything that we've recommended, please let us know, and we will address our recommendations accordingly. All right, new WatchGuard hardware. So this is exciting, something that I think has been a long time coming for our T80 WatchGuard firewalls. So the T80 model is a pretty popular tabletop model. It's a beefy performance-wise box, still getting that tabletop sizing though. But there's been a lot of good news around this particular device. So some of our key benefits here as far as what we've got with this T80. Now one of the new modules that you can purchase for this is this LTE module. So if you are not familiar with any of the devices that have module options, here in this image on the right-hand side with what appear to be angry eyebrows with our wireless antenna, a lot of the WatchGuard firewalls have these plates on them that you can take off and replace with new functions, new pieces of hardware. So one of the new things that is available for the T80 is a new LTE connection. So this is really cool. It's got 2 different internet antennas on it. It also has a place where you can add a SIM card. And really what it's giving you is the ability to add an LTE connection into the firewall. We hear this more and more with the rollout of devices not being able to get a good, stable, actual internet connection in, or looking at ways to have a failover. So now with the new LTE module, you can get that added in on that T80 device. If you already have an internet connection running into that firewall and you're adding this LTE module as an addition, then that's going to give you more option for failover if you have an ISP outage, which we all know happens. It does work with a variety of cell vendors, so you've got some functionality there. And there are external antennas, so meaning that if you need to point that thing at where the signal is coming from, you can point the antenna and not have to worry about moving your firewall. So if you have a site, if you've got a home user, something like that where you've been considering getting these LTE modules, or sorry, getting an LTE connection of some sort, it really takes away the need for any type of USB modem or things like that. Those things can be a little finicky, so this might be another option for you to look at there. Now with the T80, just to give you some insight, so in addition to the 1 gig module that has been available, we now have 1 gig or 10 gig SFP ports for our fiber connections, and now we're adding on this LTE. So if that's something that's interesting and you want to get some pricing on that, if you've got a T80 already in production, or maybe you are looking at this saying that's going to fit exactly the need that I have, let us know. We'll be happy to get you some pricing on that, and that way you can look at ways to expand out that connectivity. All right, new for AuthPoint, geofencing policies. We've been talking about AuthPoint a lot here lately. We are big proponents on MFA, and we are seeing a lot of reasons why this is necessary. MFA in general is becoming widely required, not just from things like insurance and other requirements of that nature, but also just given the amount of threats that are facing us. Just to give you guys some insight, over the week, 4th of July, which is a holiday week, which is usually one of our quieter weeks during the year, we had 2 incident response calls about breaches into a 365 environment. MFA is the way that we fix this, and WatchGuard's version of MFA is AuthPoint. We like it for a variety of reasons, and one of the reasons that we really like AuthPoint is the fact that they are constantly adding new things. So they've been working through a risk framework of adding new functionality into the service to give you more protection and more implementation options as far as getting that implemented with your VPNs, your 365, your computer logins, things like that. So they started with the ability to do network locations. AuthPoint is based off of writing policies, and so now we can write policies for the specific things we're tying it into. And one of the first things that we were able to do was say, okay, if you are connecting from a particular network, let's say you're connecting into Office 365 and you're coming from the IP of my environment. You are obviously here at the office. So through network locations, I could specify different policies. Then they gave us the ability to add time schedules. We've actually got a blog post that's getting put up on our website this week, how you implement time schedules on your AuthPoint. It's a really cool function. So you can restrict or require different types of authentication based on the time of day. The new thing that we have for AuthPoint is geofencing, meaning that we're going to have policies based off of countries. This is something that I'm really excited about implementing. One of the things that we see a lot, I keep picking on Office 365, but honestly just because that's the #1 way that people are getting breached. When we get an incident response call, one of the first things that we're looking for are suspicious logins. And 9 times out of 10, when someone's account is being breached, they are coming from somewhere outside of the United States. It is just something they are going to hop around on IPs, hop around through different countries. And so that's one of the things that we're looking for. So now through our geofencing, we can write different policies that are restrictive based off of that location. So definitely some cool stuff here. If you have AuthPoint already implemented and have not played around a lot with the new risk framework pieces, I definitely recommend you take a look at those. I really like the implementation of the policies now with AuthPoint. It gives you a lot of functionality and gives you a lot of room to grow as far as how you want that MFA to work. We will be doing just a little bit of a side thing. We will be doing a webinar here for JSCM Group about 365 and how you lock that down. So make sure you check our website if that's something that you're interested in. We push OffPoint a lot here on the WatchGuard side because it is a wonderful MFA tool. As you all know, we are a security company, so we talk about all things security, and MFA is the #1 way that you need to be protecting yourself right now. So if you have not done a lot of digging into OffPoint, we are always happy to do demos on those. Let us know, and we'll be happy to have that conversation with you guys. Speaking of OffPoint, integration. So one of the things with OffPoint is that it is not a WatchGuard specific tool, meaning you don't have to, you honestly don't even have to have a WatchGuard firewall to use it. It does work with your WatchGuard. It works really well with your WatchGuard VPNs. And if you don't have MFA on your VPNs, you absolutely need it sooner rather than later. But one of the other big things with OffPoint is that they are working very, very heavily on third-party integrations. Right now on the WatchGuard website in their help documents, they have more than 140 documented integrations. I point to this list a lot when we're talking about OffPoint just to give people an idea of how they are implementing this. Now, when they are talking about OffPoint integrations, they're breaking it down into these 5 different areas. So we've got our remote access and VPN. That's going to be things like our firewalls, remote access applications. Then we have our cloud applications. So this is going to be things like SAML integrated. There's a lot of cloud applications that are available. This is where things like our 365 are going to fall in. But if you're using Zoom, if you're using GoToMeeting, LogMeIn, you can tie that stuff into OffPoint as well. You can also tie it into operating systems. So here we use it when you log into your JSCM computer, you have to go through MFA. And then they have their IAM, privileged access applications, and then finally their other. So this would be third-party hardware, things like that. There are tons of things out there that you can implement OffPoint with. Lots of great documentation on their integration guide piece of the help documents. So if you are using OffPoint and you've tied it into a couple of things, it's working well, maybe is now a good time for you to look at some of those other integrations. What other stuff can you build it into? If you have been a little on the fence about what type of MFA do I want to use, this is one of the reasons that we talk about OffPoint. Your MFA should be capable of doing more than just one thing. Yeah, you can use the MFA in your 365, but it's only used for 365. So if you then need to turn on MFA for QuickBooks, well, now your users are having to use a completely other system. Whereas using something like OffPoint, it's centrally managed. It's giving you the ability to tie it into a lot of different services. So definitely something to check out if you haven't looked at the integration guide list. If it's been a little while since you've looked at it, there's a lot of really cool stuff in there now. Definitely, they've been doing a lot of work on this, expanding out what that looks like as far as their implementation goes. All right, demo time, limiting VPN access with TDR. So we've gotten this call question numerous times throughout the years of how do I restrict my users from being able to connect to the VPN only through a device that I manage. And honestly, for a long time, WatchGuard did not have an answer to this. We'll use the SSL VPN as an example. The SSL VPN, you need a client, but you can download that client from the WatchGuard website. It's completely free. So you're not even restricting the access by needing a license for the client itself. And at that point, all you need is the server information, the username and password, and you can connect that SSL VPN from absolutely anywhere, from any computer. Does not have to be one that is company managed. So one of the things that WatchGuard implemented a while back that we have seen a lot of good implementations on are limiting VPN access using one of their services that is available to us through Total Security, and that is TDR, Threat Detection and Response. So if you are not familiar with TDR, just to give you a little brief overview, this is allowing you to install a host sensor on your machines in your network. It is doing different types of analysis. It is designed to work alongside your AV and endpoint protection to look for suspicious behavior. So TDR on its own, very cool. You can get a lot of insight. It helps you identify suspicious files, So if there is a potential ransomware threat, that's going to be one of the things that could possibly pick up on that. But we can now use that for other things, including limiting VPN access. So what this means is that in order for someone to connect to the VPN, they have to have that TDR client installed if you have implemented this piece of your configuration, which means that that device is owned by you because you can't just go out and download TDR. You have to download the client, but then you have certain codes that are associated to your deployment of it, so a regular user is not going to be able to get access to that. So if you have been thinking of ways to restrict that VPN access, this is the way you do it. So let's do a quick little demo of this. Let me get my policy up here. So the way that we're doing this is using Host Ransomware Enforcement. So it's just a piece of the TDR implementation. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this, that you can tie this in. Typically, we would set this up with our authentication server first. So I'm going to focus, we'll do SSL just because it's pretty straightforward. I would have tied in my Active Directory to this. And yep, helps if we type our IP. Okay. And then we can go in and we can define the users and groups that we want to associate to our firewall. So let's say that I've got a group of users on my domain. When I'm attaching these users or groups, I can force this host sensor enforcement through the group itself. So then I would go through and I would build my VPN like normal. First, let's configure an external on our firewall. And we'll go ahead and stick our DNS in here. All right, so now let's set up our SSL VPN. So if you have set up an SSL, this is going to look very similar. Getting this configured. I can specify what authentication server I want to use, so I'm going to tie this into my Active Directory. And then I can specify also here through the VPN that I want to use host sensor enforcement. Now, the reason that I showed doing that in the authentication group list is that certain VPNs like IPsec, you do have to specify it there. Things like our SSL VPN, we can directly specify that host sensor enforcement. So from the firewall side, it's actually pretty straightforward. We're going to specify that first in our VPN. Now, our firewall itself does need to be pointed at our threat detection environment. So let's jump over to our WatchGuard portal. So TDR is now managed through WatchGuard Cloud. So you can log in by going to WatchGuard.com, log into your account. Under the My WatchGuard menu, you can go into WatchGuard Cloud, which will end you up here. You can also just go to cloud.watchguard.com, log in with the same credentials that you log into the regular WatchGuard website. It's all going to dump you into the same place. So TDR used to be in a different section of the WatchGuard portal. It's now under the WatchGuard Cloud. So there's two areas. If you go under Monitor Threat Detection, you see it listed here. You can also go under Configure Threat Detection, depending on what piece of this I'm trying to get set up. All right, so the first thing that I would need to do is actually get my firewall configured with TDR. So under Monitor Threat Detection, if I go to Firebox, this is where I'm going to see one of the pieces of information that I need. So my account UUID, I would, again, in Policy Manager, go to Subscription Services, Threat Detection, enable this, and then an account UUID. So this is the first piece that I need. I have enabled host sensor enforcement on the VPN, but the firewall has another piece of this where I need to say enable host sensor enforcement, and now it's asking me for another key. So if I go back to my WatchGuard Cloud, this time I'm going to go under Configure Threat Detection. And if I look under Policy, if I look under general, they like to move things around in here. If any of you have messed with WatchGuard Cloud, you know that there's a lot of stuff inside of this, and they do like to move it around a little bit. So inside of our settings, there is so we have our host sensor auto update. If we go under notification rules, we can make sure that everything here is set. But where we really need to be is host sensor settings. And if we scroll down to enable host sensor enforcement, again, they hide this a little bit. Don't worry, even when you're a WatchGuard expert, you lose things. So under Firebox VPN validation, you would need to make sure that enable host sensor enforcement for VPN configuration is turned on. If you are, and this is the first time you're setting this up, this TDR authentication key is going to be blank, so you can generate one. I'm going to take that key, and I'm going to attach it here. So to go back through those steps, because there are several, honestly, I would go ahead and start with turning on TDR on the firewall. So again, we went under subscription services, threat detection. You need to enable it. Your account UUID you will find in your WatchGuard portal. Under monitor threat detection, if you click on Firebox, you can grab that account UUID there. Again, that is unique to your environment. Then you need to say enable host sensor enforcement, and this time I won't fumble with it. We will go to our configure threat detection, host sensor settings. You need to make sure that enable host sensor is turned on. If there is no key, go ahead and generate one. Add that in. And then under your VPN, whichever one you're using, you need to make sure that the authentication group that you have is enforcing that host sensor. So what this means is that host has to be installed on your user's computer when they try to connect to the VPN. If it is not, it denies their connection. You can see all of that in your traffic logs. So it's pretty easy to identify if you've got someone trying to authenticate that they don't have that host sensor. For the host sensors themselves, all of that is again found in your WatchGuard Cloud. Under Monitor Threat Detection, if you go into Hosts, this is where you can download that sensor directly that you need to add to the computers. And when you install it, it's going to ask you for a couple of pieces of information like your account ID. All of that will be listed here. So you install that on the device that is going to have VPN connectivity, get all of it set up, and then you can ensure that your users can only connect when they are running TDR on their machine. So again, just a way for you to lock that down. If you've had concerns about people being able to connect to a VPN on a device that you don't manage, this is definitely the easiest way to do it. TDR is licensed through Total Security Suite, so you do need to have that licensed on your firewall. Outside of the VPN perspective, there's a lot of cool stuff that TDR can do. It really is good at analyzing your devices, determining if there's suspicious behavior. It can segment them. It can quarantine them off if there is something strange going on. We run it on our devices here just as an added layer of protection. It does work alongside of your endpoint protection, alongside of your AV anti-malware. It is not a pure AV solution. That is, there's a lot of options there for that, but definitely something that we like seeing is people locking down their VPN access. Gives us all a little bit of peace of mind that we need. All right, as far as upcoming training, so we have a class coming up. This week we had our Las Vegas class. Atlanta we have coming up at the end of the month. We have another Las Vegas class the middle of August, so if you really want to go and enjoy some 100-plus degree heat, we'll meet you out there. And then another Atlanta class coming up in mid-September. We also always offer custom on-site training, so if you've got multiple people in your organization that need to get trained, it's not feasible for you to send them out to classes. We are happy to come to you and do that custom training. We keep our training relevant. We try to demo as much as possible. You get access into a live firewall that you can use to play with and test things out. They're fully licensed, so you can see all of the features and functionality. And we're honest. We tell you what stuff works and what stuff doesn't. WatchGuard is not perfect, as no product is. So if there are any issues that we're running into in class, then we will make sure to address those as far as things that you can actually expect. All right. And finally, let's open it up to questions. If you have any questions at all, yes, to the person asking MFA insurance requirements, I will be happy to give you a call to discuss those. Any other questions, though, please feel free to send those over, and I will answer those before we cut you guys loose for the day. All right, looks like no questions. As always, though, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send me an email, mslater@jscmgroup.com. You can also reach out to your account manager. They will be happy to help, especially if you've got questions about any hardware or things like that. They are going to be your best bet. Thank you all for your time this month. We really appreciate it. If anything comes up between now and August, please reach out to us. Otherwise, we will see you next month for our August update webinar. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day.